So I'm going to talk about novel methods and unobtainable results. By unobtainable results, I really just mean results that are very difficult to obtain outside of a social media platform like Facebook. And sort of the goal here is to walk through a couple of research programs that we have going on at Facebook to talk about like the actual social psychology research that we are conducting from the perspective of this isn't stuff that you can do in a traditional psychology research setting. The place I'm coming from here is really just the belief that the internet is one big field study. I say it's a field study because it's people actually interacting with each other in real life. So we're talking very high ecological validity because people are interacting in a manner in which they interact normally because they are, in fact, interacting normally. I say it's low cost because once you've written the computer program, it just runs and collects the data for you. I say that there's immediate impact in this sort of research because if we make a change that it turns out is beneficial to people in general, to people who use the website, we have effectively, shown an improvement to people's lives, which we can then send to 1 billion people next week. And it also allows for experimentation. So use of the internet and examination of internet data is, to me, really important and really exciting to do at Facebook because we sort of have this whole, it matters, but it's still decent research. And on that topic, I also just wanted to sort of cover that a medium like Facebook only really works if it's useful, which generates what I consider to be sort of a positive research cycle from a standpoint of the people that use the product. So people use Facebook because they like it, because it improves their lives, because either it's entertaining or it helps them stay connected to people that they otherwise would not be able to interact with, which is to say it's real life, so the behavior is natural in a sense, or it's not affected by the study thereof. But the study thereof and the experiments that we run are then used for the specific purpose of improving the website so that people are effectively, continuing to enjoy their service. So that's sort of where I'm coming from. Now I'm going to talk about a few different research programs we have going. The first one is on emotion expression, and this is where a lot of my own research has come in. Emotion expression has been interesting to me for a long time. Even before I started my social psychology PhD training, I was interested in words and the use of words to express emotion. And so sort of coming back to the Luke system, the Luke system basically assumes that you can automatically code words that people are using into certain categories. If those categories represent emotion expressions, well then you have a sort of, you have a connection between the words people use and the emotions they're feeling. But here's the thing, words are also the basis for pretty much all Facebook communication. There's posts, there's comments, there's status updates, there's messages. There's a lot of other stuff too, like photos and shared links, but a lot of the context of those other non-word entities are sort of also themselves surrounded by words. So one study that I ran recently had to do with the effect called emotional contagion. And many of you have probably heard of emotional contagion research. It's this question that if we're expressing an emotion, can we catch it from someone? Is somebody going to catch our emotional state if we're interacting with somebody? The answer is yes, according to all of the research I've seen. But there's an interesting confound, which is that if you're interacting with someone, as most experimental paradigms have you do, and they're manipulated to be in an emotional state, well, you're interacting with someone who's happy, that is itself positive, or you're interacting with someone who's unhappy, which is itself negative. It's not entirely clear that it's the emotion you're catching rather than just an emotion that you're developing based on an experience you're having. Similarly, it's really rude to sort of smile and laugh and be cheerful in the face of somebody else's sadness, as we all know, which means we sort of mimic each other during emotional expressions. But we know from Fritz Strack's research in the 60s that, smiling actually does kind of make you happy. So what we need here is we need a study of emotion expression and people who see those emotion expressions that doesn't involve an interaction between two people. Now, that seems ridiculous until you realize that when people are sharing things on a medium like Facebook, those status updates are effectively undirected. And by undirected, I mean if I share something out to the world, the whole world can see it, but they're not expected to respond because so many people will see it. So that means that we can effectively run a study in which we look at whether emotion expressions are then generating emotional responses in non-interactants. So that's what we did. We chose 1 million English-speaking users, because why not, who posted on 3 days in a row, and we looked at their emotion expressions, and we looked at their friends' emotion expressions over the course of the next 3 days. So what we're doing here is we're really just counting the positive and negative words used in status updates. Here my friend Fred says that he hates passive-aggressive Facebook updates, but loves irony. So what we're getting out of this is 2 negative emotional terms, hates and aggressive, and 1 positive emotional term, loves, and I think we can all agree that there is positivity and negativity in this post. So that's basically what we're going about. So the question is, does my emotion expression today affect my friend's emotion expressions today and tomorrow and on day 3, controlling for all the expressions in between? And the answer, of course, is yes, or I wouldn't be talking about it. If I express a post that contains positive words, 3 days later, with a whole slew of controls for words in between, my friend's posts are only 0.98 times as likely to be negative, and they're 1.044 times as likely to be positive. Converse effect holds. If I use negative words, my friends express more negativity and they express less positivity. Now, I know what you're thinking because I get this a lot. Those are super tiny effect sizes. Do they actually mean anything? Well, if you actually multiply out the numbers of how many people were making and reading and generating Facebook status updates in 2010 when I ran this study, it looks like, you know, on a sort of per day basis, we're talking about effects on the level of 500,000 fewer negative posts for people who make a positive post on 1 day, compared to about 1.5 million more positive posts. So these tiny, tiny effect sizes at scale actually have a meaningful effect on a non-trivial number of people. But I know what you're saying. You're saying, Adam, this is just correlational research. You can't really draw causal conclusions from it. Where's the experiment? You said natural experiments. Show us an experiment. I'm not going to show you the results of the experiment because it's not published yet. But there's this thing on Facebook called the news feed. What the news feed does is it says, okay, you have 150 friends. People have like 150 friends on average. And all of those 150 people are generating content. You've just shown up on Facebook for 10 minutes. You want to get the important stuff. So we have tons of computational power dedicated to the question of, what do we show you in those 10 minutes? What goes to the top? What's the most interesting stuff that we can show people? It's called the news feed, and the goal is to keep people interested, to show them things that are interesting to them, to show them things that, you know, are especially relevant to them, which creates an awesome experimental paradigm, because when we have the newsfeed infrastructure running, we can then say, in certain cases, let's suppress posts with certain qualities. For example, posts that happen to contain positive or negative emotional content with a certain percentage. So if we turn down the positive content or the negative content just a little bit, we can then see the effects days later experimentally compared to people that have a normal newsfeed. Now you're thinking, you're messing with newsfeed, that sounds dangerous, but it's actually the rule rather than the exception, because the way that we got newsfeed to be effective and interesting in the first place is via hosts of these experiments. The literature can inform us a lot, but if we're actually going to go through the work of changing the way newsfeed works, changing the way that feeds are generated, we want to do that with empirical backing. So these experiments are going on nonstop in order to consistently improve the experiment for the people that are actually using newsfeed. And if you want to know what the results were, you'll just have to wait for the publication. I'm going to move on to another experimental sort of research area that we have at Facebook. This is work done mainly by my intern, Shovik Das at Carnegie Mellon's Human Computer Interaction Institute. He's studying what we call thinking twice. So you've thought twice about a lot of things, I'm sure. There's a lot of time that people spend thinking or rethinking something. But it's really hard to study. You know, it's an interesting sort of social cognitive process, but how do you study thinking twice? It's difficult because if I think twice then decide to do something, well, I've done it. It just looks like I've done something. And if I think twice and then decide not to do it, well, I've decided not to do it. or I've decided not to express it. So if you ask me what am I choosing to not express, I'm not going to secretly start telling you all of the weird shit that's going on in my head that I learned not to tell other people until I get to know them better. I don't know all of you very well, I'm sorry. So the question is, you know, how do we study thinking twice? Well, here's the thing. People think twice about what they post to Facebook, which is almost certainly a good thing. If I'm about to start writing like how I just really don't get how some people have this problem or that problem or whatever, I may stop and think to myself, do I really want to post this? And then the assumption is that thinking twice is good, because, you know, even though people enjoy sharing with each other, posting something you regret is actually a pretty negative experience. And when I say it's a negative experience for the person who posts it, that means fundamentally that, you know, Facebook shouldn't encourage that. You know, Facebook has no interest in encouraging people to embarrass themselves because it makes the people unhappy. They don't like it. Like, you know, from a sort of obvious standpoint, we want to do things that keep people interested in using Facebook. So we want to help people share what they want. So we don't want people to, you know, post things that they don't want to post. And so the way we go about studying this is that we look for just a sort of dummy-coded variable about whether someone has begun to type something. We just know, okay, someone started typing, kind of like the ... that you see in instant message clients, that sort of thing, or on your iPhone. And then we say, okay, did they post within the next 10 minutes, or did they spend some time thinking twice? So if they didn't post something within 10 minutes of starting the post, we say they're thinking twice about this. And what we find is over the course of 17 days, 71% of the people using Facebook are in fact thinking twice. So this means that they're drafting but not posting at least once during the 17-day period. And it appears that 33% of potential posts and about 13% of potential comments never were, which is to say they thought twice and decided better of it. So people are actually doing a really cool job of policing their own content and not sharing embarrassing things. But we can actually take it a step further and say, when is this occurring? What's making people think twice about posting so that we have a better understanding of how people want to share? Well, the main thing that we discovered from this study was that the question of audience uncertainty, or a question of how private is the thing I'm about to post, connects to whether or not people are thinking twice. So if you're typing a post that's a status update, remember the last study I talked about, if you're posting status updates that anybody can see, or that all of your friends can see, that's a lot less private than posting a comment on a status update that probably only the original person who makes the update will see. And so we see that, you know, over the course of people thinking twice, they end up thinking twice when more people are going to see it, which is, you know, pretty cool, pretty obvious. And once again, it's very difficult to do this, to actually do a study of thinking twice, unless you have a paradigm such as Facebook, where people begin to do something and then stop in a way that your web browser is aware of. I'm going to switch gears and talk about somebody else's research for a change. My colleague Maura Burke, along with Lada Adamek at Facebook, began studying parent-child communication about a year ago. So communication's important for parent and teenager relationships. You can't be on Facebook until you're 13, so it's not necessarily parent-child in the sense of children, it's all teenagers. Parent-teenager communication is hard to observe in the wild because, you know, a lot of conversations between parents and children are not automatically recorded. iPhones have changed that somewhat, but not a whole lot. But they're easy to observe online. So what Burke and her colleagues did is they looked at 400,000 posts and comments made between parents and children who identify each other as parent or child on Facebook. So what they're doing here is they're just saying, let's look at words that people are using when they're talking to their parents compared to others, or talking to their children compared to others, and let's also do loop-based emotion coding on this data. What they showed is that about 37% of people in the US actually declare a parent or a child. So this is saying like a lot of people on Facebook are friends and communicating with their parents and children. But not right away. It takes usually over a year for parents and children to actually become friends on Facebook. There's a lot of tension here, and, you know, as the paradigm expands and as more people use the system, this may change. but there's always sort of a tension between parent-child communications. It gets tense in some ways that other conversations don't. And also what we see is that approximately 10% of the friends of the parents and the children together are mutual friends. So this is a small group, but it's not negligible, which sort of reconfirms expectations and also does a decent job of showing that these really are parent-child conversations. What they show is that parent-child communication is more emotional and less profane than like fewer words about sex and swearing when you're talking to your parents. Not surprising, but it confirms that the research process is working. We also see that as children age, the sorts of words they're using to communicate with their parents also changes. So parent-teenager conversation seems a little heavier on words like pizza and grounded, whereas as the child ages and children grow up, the parents and children are talking more about things like wine and Thanksgiving. They also found that mothers are a little more linguistically nurturing in the sense of using more emotion words when talking to their children than fathers are. So I'm going to take a break just for a moment to call out the fact that there's not a whole lot of sort of theory-driven experimental testing in the Thinking Twice studies or in the parent-child communication studies, because since this is new, since this is something you really need to be in a medium like Facebook to actually study, we're really just getting these research programs started. So it's a really exciting time to be working as a psychology researcher in a big data world, because the new questions that we're able to ask, we're only just starting to ask. So like, how does this connect to everything else? That's a question that we can now start to do since we're working on this. But I'd be remiss if I didn't show you a study that actually took it all the way through, that looks at Facebook activity, runs an experiment, pushes it back on the world, and then the world actually responds to it. So I'll talk briefly about a social influence study where we're using social influence on voting. And this is based on the 2008 election in the United States. It is surprising to many people, but in the United States, if you vote, that's actually public record. So the fact that you voted, not how you voted, but the fact that you voted is available, usually for a small fee, from the state. And the state indexes who you are and whether you voted by your first name, your last name, and your birthday, which it turns out is information that people share on Facebook. And by share, I mean you have to provide that to get an account, because we need to make sure that you're at least of age, that sort of stuff. So then the question is, how can we influence voting behavior to get more people to vote? So in the 2008 election, we put up a thing at the top of people's Facebook feeds, and it just said, today is election day. Do you want to find out where you can go to your polling place? And do you want to share the fact that you voted with your friends? So if you click I voted, then we might show your face, as you can see down here, my collaborators on this project. They voted. I see that they voted. Given that I see that they voted, am I more likely to vote? So the research question here is, if we show you more of your friends, and if we show you friends from more diverse social groups, can we in fact use that to socially influence you to go out and vote? The answer is yes. Comparing showing you one face of a friend to 6 faces actually did increase the rate of voting. And by the rate of voting, I mean that based on public data for the 2008 election, due to direct and indirect effects, it appears that approximately 340,000 additional people voted than would have, because Facebook ran this I voted campaign at the top of news feeds. And this is larger than the margin by which I gather Jamie won the presidency of SPSP. So I would go ahead and say that even though we're talking about an effect size of 0.3%, in aggregate overall, this is pretty big. This is pretty big. It's not all roses. I just wanted to say, like, there are a bunch of challenges in research for big data that I would be remiss in not sharing with you before you go and run out and apply for jobs in big data, which I would encourage you to do. Just do so in an informed manner. Construct validity is a huge problem because all those interactions happening online, people are doing different things, they're just mousing around, they're clicking things. What's the ontological status of a click? What does it mean? It's not clear. You have to build this up over time. And this is why we're super lucky to have automatic, efficient coding tools like the Luke system. Because the Luke system just lets us say, that's a positive word, and 20 years of validity research has showed us that you can actually apply this across contexts. So that's why we use things like Luke so much, is because it actually allows us to say we know what these words mean in a psychological sense. Another big problem we face is that research assistants are frustratingly literal. They do exactly what you've told them, and nothing more and nothing less. And when I say exactly what you've told them, I'm really saying the way that you programmed them, because there are a whole bunch of web servers. So you have to write your research assistant's logic. We also face too much data for one computer. You know, I talk about sample sizes of 1 million or so. You can't load that into SPSS or Excel because it crashes immediately. What are you going to do? You need to learn to program. So there's sort of a big bar of programming. And finally, there's this issue of respecting people's privacy. It's not an issue. It's kind of like a moral imperative, I'd say, which actually gets me to address the comment that was brought up at the beginning. I said no comment. What I meant is, it's my last comment, which is that when someone asks me for data, the right way to respond to that question is, that data you just asked me for, can I please have it from you so as to share with everybody in this room and also the people watching on television? The answer is rarely yes. A lot of the data that we look at is personal. If someone changes their privacy so that others are not allowed to see it, we as researchers can only run automatic coding systems over that data to understand it. We can't look at it, we can't examine it, we can't identify it, we can't do any of this stuff. So the issue of respecting people's privacy is a big reason why these data are not externally available, which is also kind of unfortunate because I come from a research background that says share your data, that sort of thing. So just to sort of summarize, because I too have gone 2 minutes over, the internet is real life. You know, people used to say IRL, you know, I'm a social psychologist, meaning in real life, I'm a social psychologist. This is what they'd say on the internet. They don't say that anymore. They say offline. There's online, offline, because the internet is real life, and the sorts of research questions we can ask about real life thus must necessarily also address real life as is expressed on the internet. And so from that perspective, I really do see big data and internet analysis as the necessary, well, a necessary future for social psychology in general. And you can ask questions for up to 2 minutes.
All right. I'm Jared Willis from UT Arlington. We know that our self-regulation resources tend to decrease as the day goes on. So do people think twice less at nighttime versus in the morning or in the afternoon?
Don't know. Haven't looked at it. Good question. Good question. Yeah, I mean, cognitive resources in general sort of wear out. So I would expect that people would be, you know, probably they wouldn't think twice as much later as they get fatigued in some way. That would be my guess. It's a good question.
I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about the analysis where you were predicting whether people would post something or think twice. What went into that analysis, and what, like exactly how did you do that, and what were some things that you thought might be contenders that weren't?
Well, I mean, that paper is a 20-minute talk on its own, right? The methodology there was that we looked at whether someone had begun typing of at least 5 characters. We don't look at the characters. We don't know what the characters are. We just sort of note that 5 characters have been entered. Then we look for a post over the course of the next 10 minutes. If a post is made, then they may or may not have thought twice. If a post is not made, then they clearly did think twice. And then, you know, it really starts out like most of our exploratory analyses, which is that we look for correlates of things like age and gender and friends groups. And then we sort of go about saying, like, you know, how does this sort of cohere? It's really exploratory. And that stuff tends to be published in the computer-human interaction journals.
Yeah, so I guess I'm wondering, is this like a multivariate analysis, or do you just do like a series of correlations? Or do you do like some sort of multivariate analyses to pick up all these predictors at once?
This stuff was a whole bunch of regressions.
Okay.
There's a number of camps on regressions. Some say that you should throw everything into one regression. Some say that you should have regressions where the variables are potentially correlated. We spend a lot of time just like sort of reanalyzing this stuff ad infinitum, like, because as I said, this is an exploratory study, and then we say, this is what we saw, this is how we do it. So like the next steps are sort of asking the better questions and using a more scientifically rigorous approach to address this sort of stuff. So next paper that comes out on that topic, you should definitely read. Thanks.